That is, I spent 20-plus years of my life in the real world getting beat up by the bureaucracy. And that prepared me for the job that I took. I'm not kidding you guys. You need to stop and think about it. This is my poetic justice story. I was a builder and developer for many years, and well, actually about 23 years. And I did a lot of my stuff down in South Texas and did a lot of the stuff on the coast. And all the years I was doing that, all those years I was hiring people and I was paying taxes, doing what Americans are supposed to be doing. And my chief opposition and problem that I had was always the federal government, and specifically the Environmental Protection Agency. But the last thing that I did on the coast down there, I had to go to 26 governmental agencies to get a dock permit. And so anyway, I decided when I've got 20 kids and grandkids, and I decided when the run of my litter was all grown that I'd sell out everything and try to save the free enterprise system. Now, here's the poetic justice. I end up being the chairman of the committee that has the jurisdiction over the EPA, the very bureaucracy that tried to put me out of business for 20 years. So remember that for next time. Yeah. No, we've got, and I understand that Bill Schuette was here. His daddy was Shuster. Bud Shuster. When I was first elected to the House, the T&I committee, I was on for 8 years with him. And so I really started early. I've been in the Senate 20 years, and that was 8 years before that. So I remember the days. You know what? One of the biggest problems that we had in our road construction, our highway reauthorization programs back then, it was we had too much surplus. We had to, at that time, in fact, when Clinton came in, he's always trying to rob our surplus, and he did. He got $10 billion out of it one time. It took me how many years to get that back out, Alex? Yeah, and I got it back. But nonetheless, that was the problem. Now, you know how we got into this mess with all the people, all the environmentalists saying you got to quit buying gas and all this stuff. And so it ends up that we have a real serious problem. Now, let me mention, I've been told I do have time to mention this. And where is Braceras? I know you're here somewhere. He knew I was coming. Well, he'd already heard it. He did a great job, by the way. How many of you here were at our hearing that we had a couple of days ago? It was really good. Now, those of you who were there, you don't understand how significant that was, because this is an area where we have no disagreement on the committee. And this is the only area where Barbara Boxer and I agree. And so that's you get the most conservative member of the Senate and the most liberal member agree on something. You got broad support there, and so we have every expectation of getting it done. But I'm going to real quickly run over the other priorities we have. That's number one. We want a highway bill. We've talked about this. We talked about this last year. We actually drafted one up, but this is the year that we can do it, that we're going to have to do it. But the other areas that we're dealing with are, the second one is the EPA regulations. I'm going to say these because they all affect you guys that are here in this room. If you look at the regulations that are out there, is that Minetto over there? Is it? Stand up. I haven't seen this guy. Confession is good for the soul. I have to tell you guys, he knows this. No one else knows it. When I was in the House of Representatives and we were working together on all this stuff, I loved this guy so much that I actually went to California and supported him over his Republican opponent when he was running. Now that's yes. I forgot where I was. Oh yeah, the EPA regulations. These things I can go over just from memory and recite to you, and I don't think I need to do it. Just take my word for it. The cost of these things is unbelievable. We know a lot of things that we find offensive about Obama, but the thing that people are not aware of is the cost of regulations, the cost of the ozone regulations, the greenhouse gas regulations. All of these things that are come out are very, very expensive. Well, that's an area where Barbara and I are not going to be in agreement on anything, but we're a majority now. I have to remind my Republican friends sometimes that we're a majority. Anyway, Next area is endangered species. Now, those of you who know anything about and are concerned with building highways and bridges and all that, you know the problems. You might have a burying beetle down here, and so that is a problem. But it's also a problem to a lot of people outside of the road and the interest that you guys have. I'm talking about our farmers. That the greatest part of our coalition right now in the overregulation of the EPA are the farmers, because the farmers, they'll tell you, and the head of the Farm Bureau lets me quote him, and he says the most important things that we're dealing with are the regulations of EPA, more important than anything that is found in the Farm Bill. And he's talking about endangered species, where they can plow their fields, where they can't. The waters of the United States, there's a big issue that affects you guys in this room. That's one you might remember was what they're still trying to do is have the federal transfer the jurisdiction of regulating our water to the federal government. Right now, and historically it's been, if they're navigable waters, we understand that. That's where the federal government could be involved. However, they've been trying to get the word navigable out just for one reason. They want to be in a position to have more control in Washington. And so, and I might remind you, I can tell my good friend over here who served with me and with the other two, the last time they tried to do that legislatively, it was, anyone here from Wisconsin? Yeah. Well, it was Russ Feingold was the Senate author, and let's see, Minnesota. Who was the House author? Anyway, Overstar. Not only did we defeat the legislation, but we defeated both of them at the polls the next election because of that issue. Now, that's how, and it's so, when you stop and think about how offensive that is. In my arid state of Oklahoma, I've been in places where right now they're starving for water, and yet, that could be considered to be navigable waters under their definition. So that's a big thing. So those, I'm just saying, it's not just business, industry, you guys, roads, highways, oil people, but also farmers. So we have a coalition, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about. And then the next to last thing would be the NRC, that's the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. That's this committee that I chair has the largest jurisdiction in the United States Senate. Back when Norm was in the House, it took 3 different committees to have the jurisdiction that we have. And then the last thing, of course, is the chemical thing called TSCA, which, again, that's something that affects you in this room. I'm only saying this because these are 5 things that we're dealing with in this committee, and they all 5 directly affect you, even though you're here for the idea of the roads. Yeah, put on the next. Well, you didn't put on the first one. Yeah. So we know the situation. When I was first elected, I would talk to my friends from Pennsylvania and California and other states, and they seemed to think, well, you don't have a problem out in Oklahoma because everything you have out there is new. But ours were built to 50-year standards, and many of them were 60 years. Now we have caught up to the point where we have the same problems in some of the newer, younger, less populated states as New Jersey and some of the rest of them. So we know that the problems that we have, and we look at the future of the interstate system and how it affects some states like my state of Oklahoma. And the short-term extensions, which we'll talk about in a minute, are not the answer, and that's the main thing we have to get rid of. So we are now looking at a long-term bill that we're going to have for the sake of our roads and our highways. And what can we do to prioritize the projects that are critical to the efficient and reliable movement of freight? Well, right now the federal regulations make it hard to develop. This is what we are going to be pursuing in this. Now, I got by with that. That was required by my staff. And I said, you guys are nuts. They know. There's not a person in this room that doesn't know what a crisis we've got right now. Yeah, I don't have to tell you about a 50-year life of a highway that's 100 years old, and about deficient bridges. I think we finally passed up Missouri and having the highest number of deficient bridges, haven't we? Yeah, we're setting records out there. But you guys already know this, and what I want to do in this short period of time, I want to mention this idea of a coalition. We're in a position now to do something we've never been in a position to do before, and let me tell you why. I have to tell you that, and I'm a conservative Republican, so I can say what I'm about to say that other people can't say, and that is because I've probably, in fact, I'm quite sure I've been voted as the most conservative more times than anybody else has. And yet, you know, I'm one of these guys, I'm a little bit old-fashioned. I'm 80 years old. I have a nice career for a long period of time, and I still read that crumpled-up old book that nobody pays any attention to. It's called the Constitution. Now, if you look up Article 1, Section 8 in the Constitution, it says what we are supposed to be doing here in Washington. I'm talking about the Senate and the House. We're supposed to be defending America and roads and highways. That's what we look up Article 1, Section 8. So that's what our concern is, that we're going to be able to get together and do this. And this was never talked about before our 27-month bill that we had. The 27-month bill was one that was it was very difficult for me because it started in the Senate, and I knew that we had a lot of demagogue Republicans that were going to stand up there and talk about how you can't spend this much money and all of this, and I kind of bit my tongue a little bit because I knew we had the votes to get it passed. And yet I did say on the Senate floor, I said, you guys know better. And we had a lot of people there that were talking about that were normally not that conservative, that were trying to use this as the example for one reason. That is, had the most dollars attached to it, second only to defense. So that was the problem that we had. And so we went from there, and this guy over here that is with me, Alex, he and I went over to the House the day that we passed the bill in the Senate. I requested in the T&I committee, that's transportation, the Bill Shuster was here talking about, that's his committee, transportation and infrastructure. I requested all 33 of the Republicans on that committee to give me an audience, and all 33 showed up. And I went through this thing, and I talked to them about, if you want to know the conservative position, several of these guys were Tea Party Republicans. And I said, if you want to know the conservative position, it is to support this bill for two reasons. Number one, the Constitution says this is what we're supposed to be doing here. And secondly, the only alternative to a long-term reauthorization bill is short-term extensions. And we have a study that shows very convincingly, and I've never been challenged on this, that it costs 30% off the top just by having short-term extensions. Those of us who have been in business, and you guys know this, and you know the reason why, and I won't bore you with that. But as a result of that meeting, they brought it up in a matter of hours after that. All 33 of the Republicans on the committee voted for it. Now, I tell you that story because transportation is different than any other cause when you get back home. People are really concerned about it. I won't mention names, because, well, I'll mention one of them because she's not there anymore. In Minnesota, the House member who had been talking about how she's going to oppose all these things went back to Minnesota. Anyone here from Minnesota? Yeah, well, you might have been in the room. And they jumped on her about, you know, this is our responsibility, what we're supposed to be doing. And she said, oh, I wasn't talking about transportation. That same thing happened in 2 other states of people who are out ranting and raving about how they were going to be opposing these things. So transportation is one where you have the largest coalition working with you. You have in your transportation, you have the state chambers, you've got the department, all of the departments of transportation, which for the first time are going to be working together in unison, talking to each other, coordinating their support. NAM, the Farm Bureau, and you guys, and that's a huge number. And we have proven, so I don't have to stand here and say, I think this will work. I know it'll work because it worked with these other people. They said, well, I didn't know you were talking about transportation. And, of course, we went sailing through with that bill and didn't have a problem at all. So the problem is going to be in the Senate as opposed to the House. That's where the problem is going to be. And I would suggest to you that there are a lot of, you know right now who opposed, and I'd look it up if I were you, see who opposed from the United States Senate, the 27-month bill. And if you do that, then you know who your targets are. You know, if they opposed it once before, there's a likelihood they'll oppose it again. And you go up to them, you say, with your very large coalition, intimidating coalition, you say, all right, you guys, this is what we're going to do. And you voted wrong last time. Let's think this over. So you have that opportunity to do it. I went yesterday, and I think some of you will agree with this. First of all, to show that some of the conservative groups, and I hate to be the one to say this, and I won't mention the names of any, but there are a lot of conservative groups out there that maybe some of you belong to. The main thing they want to do is raise money. And in order to raise money, they want to be the most hysterically right-wing of all the groups. Well, one that is not that way is the American Conservative Union. The ACU is the oldest and the most reliable and the best group. At my request, I went and addressed their board of directors yesterday. And I went in there and I applauded them because this document right here I used on the floor of the Senate and then over at the House side. This is from the American Conservative Union. I'm going to read you just 3 sentences out of this. And, failure to pass the transportation bill would have a negative effect on commerce and the businesses that count on safe and reliable roads. Perhaps most importantly, those of us who believe in constitutional conservatism understand that unlike all the things the federal government wastes our money on, transportation spending is at the core of what constitutes legitimate spending. This is the ACU. I'm quoting him. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution specifically lists interstate road building as one of the delineated powers and responsibilities vested in the federal government. And then it goes on talking about Federalist Papers number 42 and all that. That's powerful, you guys. And we use that, and I went over there to address them, to congratulate them, because without this, we couldn't have gotten that passed. Now, I'm talking about the 27-month bill, and I wanted to make sure that they're still as hooked as they were at that time. So with that, I think we have this opportunity. In fact, it goes on. These are some good quotes. I'm only suggesting, not for me to sell you on anything, but for you to use. This is really good. It was Eisenhower that came up with this whole thing. Now, in the introduction that Mike gave, he mentioned that I'm the ranking member on the Senate Armed Services Committee. I'm big on what Obama has done to our military is an incredible disgrace. We're more vulnerable today than we've ever been as a nation. And I can say that just coming from an hour ago, a committee hearing that we had where we had the director of Central Intelligence who said the same thing. We're in the most vulnerable position. So that's really what drew me into this to start with. This is a quote from Eisenhower. Together, the united forces of our communication and transportation system are dynamic elements in the very name we bear, United States. Without them, we would be merely an alliance of many separate parts. That's kind of powerful. He said the obsolescence of the nation's highways presents an appalling problem of waste, danger, and death. A modern network of roads is as necessary to defense as it is to our national economy and personal safety. That's putting in the defense element of this, and I think that's very, very significant. So with that, what I'd like to do, and I told them that I would take exactly this much time, then open it up to the questions that some of you might have.